A poor girl was left to die in the snow until a rancher wrapped her in his coat and whispered, "You're safe now." Montana Territory, 1881. Snow fell hard and fast across the northern trail, turning the land into a blur of white. A wagon pushed slowly through it, wheels groaning against frozen ruts. Inside, a young woman sat huddled in the corner, shaking from the cold. Her name was Victoria Monroe. Her coat was torn, one shoulder bare. Her fingers were cracked and bleeding, her lips blue. She wore no boots, only thin stockings, frozen stiff. Every breath that left her mouth drifted upward like a ghost. Across from her sat Jed Monroe, her uncle. His scarred face glowed in the dim lantern light, his eyes sharp and hollow. He drew on a cigarette, the smoke mixing with his foul breath. "You should have fetched $40 at least," he muttered. Victoria didn't answer. She hadn't spoken in days. When her parents died of fever that fall, Jed had taken her in, though not out of kindness. He had tried to sell her first as a maid to a rancher's wife, then as a bride to a fur trader. Both refused. The girl looked too thin to survive a winter. Jed blamed her for his failure and drank himself meaner with every night. Now, as the storm thickened, he snapped the reins and stopped the wagon. The cold bit instantly when he opened the back flap. He reached in, grabbed her by the collar, and hauled her toward the edge. "Jed," she gasped, "what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He shoved her out into the snow. She fell hard, the wind knocked from her chest. "Uncle Jed, please." "You're not worth feed for the mule," he said. "Not even that." He climbed back into the driver's seat, cracked the reins, and disappeared into the storm. Victoria staggered to her feet, calling after him, but her voice vanished in the wind. He never looked back. She tried to walk, but the snow swallowed her steps. Her feet bled through the stockings, red spots blooming behind her. The storm howled louder, pushing her down each time she tried to rise. Clutched beneath her dress was a small cloth pouch, all she had left. Inside were her mother's final letter, a silver button from her baby gown, and a scrap of unfinished embroidery. She stumbled toward a faint light in the trees, thinking it might be a cabin. But when she reached it, she found only a broken hunting shack, its fire long dead. Her strength gave out. She slid to the base of a pine tree, her cheek pressed against the snow. "Mama," she whispered, voice barely there. "I tried." Her eyes closed. The world fell silent. From the other side of the valley, a single rider made his way through the storm. His name was Jordan Hartley. He was heading home from a supply run, his horse weary, his coat soaked. The dog trotting behind him barked suddenly, veering toward the tree line. Jordan reined in and followed. That was when he saw her, a small figure curled in the drift. "God Almighty," he breathed. He jumped down, landing knee-deep in snow, and knelt beside her. She wasn't moving. Her face was white as marble, her lashes frozen. He brushed the snow from her cheek. Her skin was ice cold. Without hesitation, he pulled off his heavy coat, thick and fur-lined, and wrapped it around her small body. He pressed his hand against her neck, searching for any sign of life. A faint pulse, slow, weak. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey, don't quit on me. You're safe now. You hear me? You're safe." Her lips trembled, a breath catching, but no sound came. Jordan gathered her into his arms. She felt impossibly light. He mounted his horse, settling her in front of him, her head resting against his chest. He wrapped his scarf around her face, pulled her close, and urged the horse forward. The snow stung his face, but he bent low, using his body to block the wind from her. His arms tightened protectively around her. "Hold on, little dove," he murmured. "The storm's not taking you tonight." Behind them, the blizzard swallowed their tracks. Only the faint rhythm of hoofbeats echoed through the storm, carrying 2 lives away from the edge of death, one saving, the other just beginning to be saved. Victoria opened her eyes to the golden flicker of firelight dancing across wooden walls. She was warm, too warm for winter. For a moment, she thought perhaps this was heaven, or something close to it. But then, pain reminded her she was still alive. Her body ached, her feet burned. Her throat felt like it had been scraped raw with ice. She tried to sit up and winced. Her limbs were stiff, wrapped tight in heavy wool blankets. Her hands were clean, wrapped in neat strips of bandage. A thick coat lay across her chest, still carrying the scent of leather, smoke, and something faintly like pine. She pulled it closer, but the fear rose before comfort could settle. Where was she? Who had touched her? Was she alone? The door creaked. A man stepped in, tall and broad, carrying a steaming mug. He paused when he saw her awake. His face was unreadable. Without a word, he placed the mug on the table beside her, keeping a respectful distance. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You're safe here. Storm's past." Victoria said nothing. Her hands gripped the edge of the blanket tighter. He didn't come closer. Instead, he walked to the other end of the room and took a seat on a stool near the fire. The crackling of burning wood filled the silence between them. She watched him warily. He was young, maybe in his early 30s. His boots were muddy, his flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves. There was something tired in his eyes, but not cruel. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jordan Hartley," he said, without turning. "Ranch is mine, you can rest. No one's coming for you tonight." She scanned the room. A rifle hung above the mantel. The furniture was rough, handmade. On a small shelf, she spotted a dust-covered photograph of a woman holding a child. The woman's smile was faded, but familiar. The boy had Jordan's eyes. That night, once the fire burned low and she heard his footsteps crunching outside in the snow, Victoria slipped out of the blanket. She found his coat, pulled it around her shoulders, and crept toward the door. The moment she opened it, the wind slammed into her like a brick wall. Her knees buckled. The cold stole her breath. She stumbled and fell into the snow. Then arms lifted her. She flinched, expecting anger. But Jordan said nothing. He just carried her back inside, set her near the hearth, and poured her a cup of hot water. He knelt by the fire and spoke without looking at her. "You walk out there again. The cold will finish what it started." Tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't stop them. They spilled down her cheeks without sound, and she didn't even try to wipe them away. He did not comfort her with words or touch. He simply let her cry. That night, while she slept, Jordan stayed by the fire. He didn't move, except to add another log now and then. His eyes flicked to the door every few minutes, like he was watching for ghosts only he could see. Before turning in, he removed the boots from his feet, peeled out the thick wool linings, and gently stuffed them into the battered shoes she had arrived in. The soles were cracked, the leather stiff with cold, but come morning, they would be warm. Victoria didn't know any of this. She slept through the night for the first time in years. No threats, no shouts, no boots stomping upstairs. Just the soft hiss of logs burning slow, and the quiet presence of a man who had given her back something she thought the cold had stolen forever, a sense of safety. Victoria's body was healing, but it was the silence that worked on her spirit. She began folding blankets, rinsing cloths, steeping herbs for tea. Her movements were careful, not out of weakness but habit, as if she still wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. But Jordan didn't stop her. He didn't hover. Instead, he worked outside most days, repairing the barn's roof or digging trenches to channel runoff away from the cabin. Each morning, she would find a thick slice of bread left by the fire, wrapped in linen, with a note tucked beneath it in plain handwriting. "Eat. You'll need your strength." They rarely spoke, but the quiet had softened. It no longer pressed down like weight. It simply was. One night, the wind died down. The fire crackled low in the hearth, and they both sat at the table without planning to. Jordan held a metal cup between his hands, steam curling upward. His eyes were fixed on the fire, unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "She was 12. Victoria looked up. "My sister, Nora. 3 winters ago, there was a storm, just like the one you came in." He paused. His jaw twitched. The silence stretched. "I was bringing supplies back from Mill Creek. Thought I had time." He took a slow sip, then set the cup down. "She was waiting on the porch. I found her curled against the door. I carried her like I carried you. But I was too late that night." The knuckles of his right hand turned white as he gripped the cup tighter. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "You saved me. That makes up for something." Jordan shook his head slowly. "I don't believe in making up for the dead. I just try not to fail the living." Victoria lowered her gaze. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the table. Then, quietly, she spoke. "I was supposed to marry a man. My uncle arranged it. $40, a rifle, and a bottle of rye." Jordan didn't interrupt. He tied my wrists, said I needed to look obedient. The man took one look at me and called me useless. I guess he wasn't wrong. She tried to laugh but choked instead. "There was another man, before that. Hit me because I burned the soup. Told me I'd never be more than trouble with a mouth." She rubbed her eyes with her sleeve. "I stopped being a person somewhere along the way." Jordan slid his cup across the table, the metal warm from the fire. "You're one now," he said. He didn't reach out. He didn't try to touch her. But the simple act of sharing warmth, it was enough. The next morning, he led her out back. The air was crisp, and snow still crusted along the fence posts. But behind the cabin, nestled near the tree line, were a dozen dried stalks, standing proud in the frozen ground. "My sister planted these," he said. "They don't die easy." Victoria crouched, brushing her fingers against one shriveled petal, fragile as parchment. "I came from ashes," she said quietly. "Maybe I can still grow." Jordan didn't say anything. But when she stood and looked at him, his eyes had changed. There was no pity in them, only respect. That afternoon, the wind picked up without warning. A deep howl echoed through the valley, rattling the barn doors. Jordan ran to tie them down. Victoria followed, instincts sharp from years of jumping at every sound. A plank came loose, swinging like a blade. Jordan shouted, "Get back!" and shoved her away just as it struck his shoulder. He stumbled, grimacing. Victoria scrambled to him, hands trembling as she tore off her scarf to press against the bleeding gash. "You saved me again," she whispered. Jordan gave a half-smile, wincing, just keeping the world even. That night, while he rested, Victoria moved quietly around the cabin. She took a jar from the shelf, filled it with water, and stepped out to the patch of flowers. From the few that still clung to their stems, she picked 3. Inside, she set the jar on the table near the fire. When Jordan noticed, he raised a brow. "They may be small," she said, "but they survived winter." Jordan looked at the flowers, then at her. His voice was low, almost reverent. "Just like someone else I know." The fire crackled, shadows danced on the log walls, and for the first time since they met, their eyes held not fear or guilt, but something gentler, something warm. 2 people, 2 pasts. 1 beginning. The wind carried the scent of thawing earth and soap. Victoria stood in the morning sun, pinning damp linens to the clothesline behind the cabin. Her fingers, though still wrapped in healing bandages, moved with quiet confidence. Then she heard it. The crunch of wheels on gravel. Hoofbeats. Her spine stiffened. A weather-beaten wagon rolled into view, pulled by a sway-backed mare. The man who stepped down reeked of whiskey and sweat. His coat was too thin for the weather, his eyes bloodshot. Jed Monroe. Well, well, he slurred, stumbling forward. Look at you. Livin' soft already. Victoria dropped the clothespin. Her breath hitched. I've come to collect what's mine, Jed said, gesturing lazily toward the cabin. Got a fella in Helena ready to pay double. You're finally worth something, girl. Victoria backed away slowly, retreating toward the cabin door. You ain't gonna like it out here much longer, Jed added, smirking. Winter's always got a way of killin' the weak. She slammed the door shut behind her and slid the bolt into place, heart pounding like a trapped bird. When Jordan returned an hour later, he found her curled by the hearth, shaking. He didn't ask questions, didn't need to. Jed was standing in the middle of the yard, arms crossed, looking proud of himself. Jordan dismounted, tethered his horse, and strode up without a word. Jed grinned wide. So, this is where she's been hidin'. I figured you'd be the bleeding heart type. Jordan stopped between him and the cabin door. His stance was calm but firm. She's not hiding, Jordan said, and she's not yours. Jed's eyes narrowed. She's my kin. That gives me the right to take her back. She's not livestock. You'll leave this land before I make you. Jed let out a slow, mocking laugh. You gonna shoot me, Hartley, over trash like her? Jordan didn't answer. He just stood there, unmoving. You'll regret it, Jed hissed. Women like her, they ruin a man, filthy and broken, all sweet, until they twist your guts and leave you dry. The door creaked open behind Jordan. Victoria stepped out, hands trembling but her voice steady. You left me to die, she said. In the snow, like an animal. But I didn't die, Jed. I lived. Jed turned to her, nostrils flaring. You lived because someone else cleaned up my mess. Victoria's chin lifted. That means you don't own me anymore. You never did. Jed's hand twitched toward his belt. He stepped forward, arm raised. Before he could reach her, Jordan caught his wrist mid-air and held it tight. His grip was like iron, his face a stone mask. One more move, Jordan said quietly, and you won't leave this ranch standing. Jed tried to jerk free but couldn't. The silence that followed was thick with threat. He spat at the ground. This ain't over. He turned back toward his wagon, muttering curses as he climbed aboard. Before cracking the reins, he looked over his shoulder and sneered. Men like you don't keep girls like her. She'll rot you from the inside out. Jordan said nothing. He only watched until the wagon disappeared down the hill, then turned to Victoria. Her legs gave out, and she sank to her knees. He reached her just in time, lowering her gently to the ground. I'm sorry, she whispered. He brushed the hair from her face. Don't be. I was so scared. So was I. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither said anything. The wind passed through the clothesline, drying linen flapping like quiet applause. Behind them, the door to the cabin remained open. Inside, the fire still burned. The morning was still blue when Victoria folded the note and left it on the small wooden table by the hearth. Her bag was light, only what she had brought and what she had earned with her own hands. On the doorstep, she paused. There, sitting neatly against the frame, was a pair of soft leather shoes, stitched by hand. The same ones she'd seen Jordan working on quietly in the evenings, pretending it was just something to pass the time. She reached down, fingertips brushing the smooth seams, then pulled away. She didn't feel worthy of them. Not yet. Victoria walked, head low, past the fence line, and into the pines, where frost still clung to the tips of leaves. At the stream, she sat where the rocks flattened out into a wide bank. The water moved slow beneath a thin sheet of ice. Her breath came in quiet clouds as she stared into it. Behind her, hooves broke the silence. Jordan pulled the horse to a stop just above the incline and stepped down. His boots crunched against the frozen moss as he walked toward her. She didn't look up. "You forgot your shoes," he said gently. Victoria drew her knees in tighter. "You shouldn't have followed me." "I didn't have a choice. I left a note. I read it." She finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but dry. "I can't stay. I don't want to bring more trouble to your door." He crouched down beside her. "You're not trouble, Victoria." She shook her head. "Jed might come back. Or worse. I can't be the reason you get hurt." Jordan was quiet for a long moment, then said, "You think I kept you warm through a storm, patched up your hands, built you shoes, because I thought you owed me? I don't want to cost you anything." He smiled, barely. "You already did. The moment I found you, half frozen in the snow, I started to care. That cost me sleep. It cost me peace. But it also gave me something back." She blinked. "I didn't realize how long it had been since I wanted something good to stay." He reached into the breast pocket of his coat and pulled out a thin strip of cloth. Wrapped inside was a silver bracelet, simple, worn, smooth at the edges, etched faintly with initials long faded. "This belonged to my sister," he said. "Only thing I kept, after we buried her." Victoria's breath caught. "I used to think I'd never give it to anyone." He took her hand and placed the bracelet in her palm. "But this was meant for someone brave." He lowered himself to one knee in the snow beside the stream. "Marry me, Victoria. Not because you owe me, not because you feel safe here, but because I want to wake up every day knowing you chose to stay." Her hands trembled around the bracelet. She looked at him, really looked, at the scar near his jaw, the windburn on his cheeks, the steadiness in his eyes. "You'd want a girl with no name, no family, and nothing to offer? You've got everything that matters," he said, "and a name's something we can build together." She swallowed hard, then nodded once. "Yes," she whispered. The stream bubbled quietly beside them, and the sun began to rise behind the trees. Spring had folded into summer with gentle persistence, and the air around the Hartley ranch smelled of new beginnings. The earth thinned its icy crust, wildflowers pushed up soft green shoots, and the long days stretched warm with promise. On the plot of land where Jordan's sister once sowed seeds, a small gathering stood beneath a sky that had forgotten its storms. Victoria stepped out in her dress, stitched from the greatest gift she had ever received. Jordan's old flannel shirts, patched with cloth from his sheets, sewn with the steady hands she had learned to trust. She carried a bouquet of wild blooms, crimson Indian paintbrush, soft blue lupine, and golden daisies, flowers that rose from soil that once held nothing but snow. She walked barefoot, the cool grass gentle beneath her soles, like a reminder that she had earned this ground under her feet. There was no minister, no grand altar. Only the open sky, the quiet hum of cicadas, and the faces of neighbors who had watched the ranch grow from hard winter into green promise. Jordan stood across from her, in his clean shirt and sturdy boots, his hand reaching for hers. His eyes were constant, heavy, not with regret but with hope. He spoke plainly. "No more cold, no more fear, just this fire, and us." His voice carried across the clearing. The breeze lifted Victoria's hair, and she lifted her head to meet his gaze. "I choose you," she said, "not for pity, not for debt, but for every morning I get to build beside you." Her words landed in the warm air, certain. After the simple pledges, Jordan put the wildflower bouquet gently into Victoria's hand, then dropped the reins into a nearby post. They walked into the field together, and beneath the late afternoon sun, they danced. Not in showy steps, but in a rhythm familiar from days of shared toil. The field echoed with soft laughter, the world caught in a moment that felt both small and infinite. Weeks passed, the ranch growing smoother in its routine. Then, one bright morning, Jordan and Victoria rode into town to buy a young mare. The street throbbed with midday heat. Horses stamped, shop doors swung, men leaned against saloon posts. Victoria wore a cloak over her dress, the wildflower embroidery peeking at the hem. They tied their horses at the hitching post in front of the general store. Jordan greeted the clerk. Victoria scanned the crowd with calm eyes. That's when she spotted the wagon rolling into town. Jed Monroe stepped down from the seat, flanked by two men who looked built for trouble. His face was red with anger, or drink, it didn't matter. Jordan turned just as a fist struck his jaw from behind. He stumbled, blood warm on his cheek. Victoria's heart jolted free of fear and memory alike. She slid a hand to the saddlebag, and her fingers closed on the familiar weight of the revolver Jordan had taught her to load. She drew it smooth and raised it aimed at Jed. "Take one more step," she said clearly. The shot rang out. The horse whinnied. Townfolk paused mid-step. Jed froze. Victoria's voice shook, but her aim did not. "That sheepskin coat doesn't mean you own me." From a porch emerged the saloon cook, leaning on a broom. "That girl works harder than half the men here." "Let her be," he called out. A miner shouted agreement. A schoolteacher closed her notebook and stepped forward. The sheriff appeared, tall and quiet. "Jed Monroe," he stated, hand on his badge. "You've got 24 hours to leave town and take your misery with you. You're banned from this county." Jed glared, spat on the ground, then turned heel and disappeared with his men across the street, onto a wagon and out of the dust of the main road. Jordan wiped his cheek, then looked at Victoria. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, and for the first time she believed it. No more fear, just this fire. He took both her hands in his. The sun sunk behind the hills. The air cooled, but the heat between them did not fade. They rode home together in the dusky light, the field of wildflowers between them waving softly. The ranch had stood the storm, and so had they. Their love was not loud, it was resilient, it was rooted. And as they entered the cabin, where heat still waited, Jordan whispered, "Welcome home." Spring melted into summer, and the ranch grew busier with each passing day. The creek ran clearer, fences stood straighter, and the soil gave back more than it took. In the center of it all was Victoria. She woke before sunrise, grinding corn by hand, checking the chicken coops, tending the horses, and preparing meals that smelled of thyme and sweet cream. She had learned how to stitch harnesses, set bone for a limping foal, and even how to render sheep tallow for soap. More than once, Jordan stood by the fence line, watching her move from task to task with quiet purpose. He would shake his head with a soft grin. "She runs this place better than I ever did," he once muttered to himself while oiling a saddle. Victoria didn't notice the pride in his eyes. She was too busy living the life she had once believed wasn't meant for her. But life, as always, had its own rhythm. One morning, just as the sun touched the tips of the cottonwoods, Victoria collapsed in the north field. Jordan saw her go down from across the pasture and dropped the tools in his hand without a second thought. He ran to her, heart in his throat. "Victoria!" he shouted, kneeling beside her. Her face was pale, her forehead clammy, her breathing shallow but steady. He carried her back to the cabin, wrapping her in cool cloths and whispering reassurances, though his hands trembled. When she finally stirred, hours later, she blinked up at him, confused. "What happened?" she asked, voice hoarse. "You fainted. Scared me half to death," he said. "We need to get Doc Brigham." But when the doctor arrived later that day and examined her, he smiled softly and said, "She's not ill. She's expecting." Jordan sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then he looked at Victoria, whose eyes had filled with tears. "You came to me dying in snow," he whispered, "and now you carry life." Victoria reached for his hand. They didn't speak for a long time. There were no words needed. That night, Jordan made stew, though he burned the bread and oversalted the broth. Victoria laughed for the first time in days. Later, as they sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, she leaned against him and rested her hand over her belly. "I never thought I'd have a future," she said quietly. Jordan kissed her temple. "You don't just have a future," he replied. "You're building it." The fire crackled behind them. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and above them the stars burned steady, like promises kept. 1 year later, the land had changed. So had they. The snow had long since melted, giving way to rich soil and golden fields. Wheat swayed in the breeze, sunflowers reached for the sky, and the sound of new life filled the air. Victoria walked the edge of the pasture with a small bundle in her arms. Hope, their daughter, cooed softly against her chest, bundled tight in a blanket sewn from scraps of Jordan's old shirts. The baby had her father's eyes, steady, storm-tested. Jordan joined them, leading a mule cart filled with sacks of grain. He wiped sweat from his brow and looked out over the land with a quiet satisfaction. Near the gate, a hand-carved sign swayed gently in the wind. The letters were burned deep